Gentlemen, we have a bit of substance to talk about retaining to NBA fans and how they've been behaving recently. Now, to use this phrase and this word is a little disheartening coming from a league that has worked so hard to build the fan viewing experience to something that you probably don't get anywhere else in the NBA. NBA fans have been acting like children, just misbehaved, immature, crazy children that, kick and scream when they don't get anything they want. And we're going to start with Boston because there's a little substance to this Nets series with Kyrie Irving. He put out a quote before heading back to Beantown, and he brought up, some issues that we've been dealing with as a country in the past year or so about, systematic racism, and he wanted to keep it strictly about basketball. Now, Jack Roach is a Massachusetts faithful, and he is someone who here at WFUV we all cherish, as well as our other Massachusetts faithful. And Jack's a good person, so I want to put that out there. But there's just, I'm sure you have seen at Celtics games, there's just a couple bad apples that go out there and they just ruin it for everybody. And Jack, I'm gonna let you go first. What is this like? I'm from New York, so I don't really come into contact with any of this, but what's it like?
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in Boston. It's a place that I cherish. It's a place that I love, and it's a place I feel comfortable in. Part of that because I was, a white guy from a predominantly Irish town. Um, but as a sports fan, there definitely have been, instances that make you raise your brow. For me, that first came at Fenway Park, where fans were using, racial slurs at the Orioles' Adam Jones. I know a couple years ago, a Celtics fan was, got a 2-year ban for using racial slurs against DeMarcus Cousins. And now we're hearing Kyrie kind of express his feelings around, those comments in Boston's history of it. And you look at a guy like Jaylen Brown, who is a real leader, not only in the Celtics, locker room, that clubhouse, but for the city of Boston. And he had a quote essentially saying that he acknowledged what Kyrie's saying, but didn't love the manner it was brought up, kind of centering around a playoff game. Because unfortunately, this issue in the city of Boston, in the United States of America, goes so much deeper than sports. For me, I saw it in public schooling. I grew up in a town with great public schools, and I lived 2 miles away from Fenway Park. But if I lived 1 mile away, I wouldn't have gone to a so great public school. And that unfortunately affects minority communities more than white people, and it's sad. And I understand that Kyrie brought it up in the sense that there are more fans coming back to TD Garden, but it's really an issue that's so much bigger than Game 3. It's so much bigger than sports.
And Jack, I think you said it very well that Boston, and we love you here, and you and I obviously have known each other a little longer than I've known Chris, but we're friends, and that doesn't take anything away that I would think of you or anyone from Massachusetts that I know as a what. You guys are all good people, but it's just the, I guess, discrepancy that we as a society have to live with. And I don't blame Jaylen Brown for saying it's the wrong place to bring it up. I felt that was an appropriate response coming from him because he always says the right things. He tries to do the right thing. He's not a bad guy. He's a really good person. And I watched his GQ interview, when they were just like, what do you do for a side hobby? He's just like, oh, I listen to music, I collect records, and he's a good guy. But Danny Ainge, the Celtics GM, basically turned a blind eye, saying, when he had Kyrie on the Celtics, he never really talked to him about this kind of stuff and never heard that from him. And he just said, we want to play basketball. Now, in hindsight, I guess looking back on how he approached it in the heat of the moment, I guess you want to stick it to just, we're here for playoffs and the fans are just coming back. But it's a little disheartening when he kind of won't say, hey, cut it out. We don't need this. And unfortunately, Boston has this reputation of being a racist place, to put it bluntly. That famous picture with Ted Landsmark from the 80s when he almost got stabbed with the American flag, and you guys can go Google that. And then Utah, I guess, kind of has that reputation as well, as a parallel, I guess, out west, because fans there were taunting Ja Morant's family and him. And I'm not even going to repeat what was said by one fan. It was just so disgusting and horrible, and every negative adjective in the book. I felt like they should be put in jail for that. And he called one of the other fans called his mom a B word. I'm not going to say it. Do you guys think, Chris, you can hop in as well, is there a problem? I don't want to say there's a full on, we need to close the league again and ban fans, but is there a problem, I guess, with how fans behave now? Because usually NBA fans are civil and players will speak out to say, hey, quit it. Like, that doesn't belong here. But they're kind of popping up in two places. And you know what? It's a little sad to see it, how it's going. And I feel it, I have no words for it. It's a hard thing to talk about.
Yeah. So quarantine was tough on everybody. It forced us all to go into hiding, pretty much all respectively, coop ourselves up, to use a phrase that would imply the correct feeling of being stuck. Things like, as I mentioned earlier, being in a sea of hundreds of New Yorkers, not able to breathe or see or smell anything but the hundreds of people around me. Like, to miss a moment like that means something's happened. Something's happened if you miss being packed like a sardine in New York City. And what happened was we were all forced to just live with ourselves, live on our own by ourselves for way longer than anyone was expecting, was ready for. Much like my dog, when he's in the house by himself for a day while we're out, and when we get back, lots of pent up energy, right? Now, I'm not saying it's the pent up energy that's causing people to act out of line, but this pent up energy and perhaps the time that people spent with themselves at home is bringing out a side of people that, if you knew existed already for a very long time in the minds of millions of people in this country, which is the side of people that sees Black people, frankly, as solely a form of entertainment, and would therefore, result in people justifying things like, can you imagine your bank teller like drops your piggy bank, drops your coins all over the place? You're just like, wow, you suck at your job. You just spit on them. You just go and like, who the hell does that? Because someone, did something not great at their job. It's just, obviously these players are paid millions of dollars because they have to deal with a lot of stress that a lot of people don't. They make a lot of money that a lot of people don't, and all that. They're human beings. They're doing their job. To think that pouring popcorn on a player, to think that spitting on a player I'm not saying that guy went there that night with that intention. The fact that in a split second, he felt that because he was a Knicks fan, Trae Young was right in front of him. Trae Young's been a little sassy with the Knicks fans. He thought that entitled him, that gave him the right to spit on Trae Young. Period. Like, that's it. That's what he thought happened. The fact that he thinks that that's possible, fact that he thinks that there's something that would allow that is very indicative of a huge problem, not just in this country, in this world, in regards to race. I don't think this is fans like not knowing how to act, as a lot of people are saying. I think this is fans coming out and acting how they always wanted to. I'm not talking about fans, and for our listeners on the radio, I'm gesturing with my hands to refer to every sports fan. No, I'm not talking about every sports fan. I'm talking about that small group of crazies, frankly, that have these ideals that are racist, whether intended to be or not, that Black people are just below you and are to entertain. This is a big problem, and it's getting a lot of light on it right now, with fans back in the buildings and with people choosing to act out in this way. Only because I'm always putting a positive angle on things. I can only hope that this starts to help shed light on this issue, in whether it's good light or bad, it's light on this issue. And I hope we see progress from there. I hope we see change in arena rules, or what, like to get a 2-year ban for calling DeMarcus Cousins a racial slur. Like, you said that,
yeah.
and I almost laughed. Like, of course it was only 2 years for doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like of course it was only 2 years for doing that, because of course, and it needs to stop being that way. And that we know. The problem is making that turnaround happen. This is an event that, although unfortunate, and I say this singularly just to refer to the couple of cases that we've seen last couple of weeks of fan misbehavior, I hope that they at least bring the needed attention to this mindset. I'm wearing a Dreamville hoodie. J. Cole himself has lyrics about how white people see Black people as like basically Pokemon that are either to evolve into a rapper, a basketball player, or a drug dealer. And that's just terrible. But it's showing itself on a national scale, on television. That's so embarrassing to show yourself as subscribing to that stereotype, that school of thinking. And people are doing it with a smile on their face in front of the whole country. That is the real problem. The problem is not cleaning up the popcorn. It's what that popcorn represents. So for all it's just popcorn people, for somehow, yes, they exist, it's just spit people. It's not just spit. And first of all, if it was just spit, that's besides the point. It's not just spit. It's not just popcorn. It's a whole lot more problems than that.
I think the spit thing, considering where we've just come out from or about to come out from, is pretty gross. And I think Trae Young has every right to be mad at that fan. Now, again, has the reputation. He's not known for diving into this stuff. He kind of just keeps his business on the back burner. He doesn't really let anyone into that sort of light. But you bring up a good point that we need to magnify it a little bit. And I appreciate people like Dwayne Wade, minority owner of the Utah Jazz, because he bought some shares in the team. He told that fan and he complimented the Jazz, like, I'm glad that we were able to kick him out, and that stuff doesn't belong here. I feel like the NBA can't do much about the popcorn stuff and the spit stuff because it's not like hockey or football where they can, I guess, distance the fans and the players, and where they put the plexiglass. Or in the NFL, you're literally 4 or 5 feet up the ground and well away from the field of play and the bench. I don't know what more the NBA can do to stop this. I mean, extra security, but then you look at it as, if you want to go this route, is it's counterproductive because you're going like this the whole game. Oh, I can't see. That's like the other way to look at it. I don't know. Do you do that? Do you? I don't know the racial stuff. I don't know
Here's
what they can do.
Thomas. Here's what you do.
Jack, if you have a solution, I will hear.
Well, it's not a solution, but it's a start. It's a start. You need people in leadership positions like Danny Ainge not being dismissive.
Yeah, there you go.
In a city where their biggest icon, Bill Russell, refused to have his Hall of Fame retirement ceremony in front of fans because of what he endured as a black man, a black athlete in the city of Boston. You can't have GMs of teams just almost ridiculing the situation.
Yeah.
Especially with the city with such polarizing history around it. And Danny Ainge should know better as a guy who played, in 80s, one of the best Celtics squads. He's been around. He's got a long history with Boston. And to think that he doesn't know the impact of his comments and the history of Boston is really concerning.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Leadership is what is preached in sports. And I guess something like this, though in the past, it wasn't really magnified, but now that it is, and you start to realize, wow, this is a really big problem. It
was always more. A problem. It was just allowed. It was allowed right. Because the people, that's what I was looking for. The people that players would turn to try to solve the problem would give the same type of answer that Danny Ainge just did, proving that even if indirectly, and therefore pretty directly, they are part of the problems themselves. As you start to see more diverse brain trusts, front offices, ownership groups, I think you start to see some of these problems fade. Another problem is that there's a reason that we won't see ownership groups with women, with diversity, and that is because of just how behind those groups are in the sports world in the first place. It's just imbalance that builds on imbalance that builds on imbalance that's used to perpetuate more imbalance. And it's great to get to a point where we're just like shining the brightest light possible right on this and being like, this is bad. Because if that's what it's going to take, I'll do it for every problem on this planet, every racial injustice, if magnifying it as large as possible and making people be not able to not talk about it is what it takes, then that's sadly what it takes. And I'll help contribute to all of those efforts.
Before I want to just jump to Naomi Osaka, but before we do, please, God, for all our viewers, just please behave. Like you're going to see entertainers, essentially. Don't ruin it for everyone else, please. That's the message I'm going to put out there.